In the early days, it was all about creating a civilization, as it was all wilderness. Now it's about protecting wilderness as civilization is getting closer and closer.
From outside of our hotel, we have hundreds of kilometers of hiking trails. We've got fantastic world-class ski resorts in Lake Louise, Sunshine Village, and Mount Norquay.
Here it comes. It's going big, John. John. Leave the camera, John. Leave the camera, run.
Anytime you put snow on a slope, there is potential for avalanches. Depending on the variations in the layers or the variations in the snowpack, you can get stronger or weaker snowpacks, and the addition of more snow or rapid changes in temperature, anything like that, any changes in the snowpack can create instabilities, and then avalanches can occur. Quite often, they're triggered by people simply skiing or walking on them.
Bev Park Dispatch. Où est votre urgence? What is the exact location of your emergency?
Hi, this is Sam Dispatch.
Yes, it is.
Hi, I've got an avalanche report to make.
Okay.
Shoal Valley, just on the first crossing on the backside of Fairview there. Starts 2.5 to 3, two involved. Both buried, one self-extracted. The other one was buried for 15 minutes. Cyanotic and spontaneous breathing on.
Okay, can I get your name?
Yep, my name's Jonathan Gillen.
Okay.
Avalanches tend to come in cycles, so last week we actually went through a fairly significant avalanche cycle. where there's some natural avalanches running, some of them all the way to the valley floor, so pretty big avalanches, what we call size 3s or bigger, that would, demolish your car. But typically for people that have accidents in the backcountry, hopefully it's the smaller sizes, 2 to 2.5, but still have pretty significant consequences. You're pretty fragile as a human being, so if you get buried for a significant amount of time or pushed through some trees, you're going to get hurt or worse. Leaving the ski area and entering the backcountry is not necessarily a bad thing, and that's not prohibited or discouraged even. The only thing we tell people is if you're going to do that, then you should be prepared for that. We provide avalanche control services to the avalanche paths that threaten the highway. And in Banff Park, it's the avalanche paths on the Sunshine Access Road and the Banff-Jasper Highway. And we also deal with the Trans-Canada and Yoho and the Kootenay Highway.
The Trans-Canada Highway has on average 17,000 vehicles per day. In the summertime, it's 25,000 with peaks up to 35,000 vehicles per day. And that translates to one car passing every 3 seconds. So you can imagine how difficult it is, not just for people to cross a highway like that, but also for wildlife. They've reduced collisions with elk and deer and moose by more than 96%. That is from over 100 elk vehicle collisions a year to down to less than a half dozen. For all large mammal species in the park, it's greater than 80% reduction. So huge reductions by having these measures in place. We found that there were a dozen different grizzly bears using these crossing structures, and the most surprising part and promising part is that it was 50-50, male and female. It wasn't biased towards male movement across these structures. So in essence, these crossing structures have been able to obliterate the impacts of the highway for grizzly bears. species have their preferences. We found that grizzly bears, wolves, elk and deer and moose prefer large structures, not just structures like this wildlife overpass, but also big open-span bridge underpasses, whereas black bears and cougars prefer the exact opposite. They prefer these structures that are more constricted, that are darker, provide a lot of cover.
Up beyond there is what we would call the accumulation zone, where more snow falls than melts. It's basically the ice factory. Snow builds up year after year, and what you end up with is a transition from snow to ice, and then it begins to slowly move down the valleys. So what you've got coming from the ice field is the Athabasca Glacier here. You can see at the head of the valley it's quite rough as it goes over cliffs, forming ice falls. The lower part is really smooth because the valley underneath is flat. Well, the interesting thing is that the first time I saw this glacier was about 1964, and the ice was pretty much where I'm standing now. Since then, the glacier has retreated back probably 400 or 500 meters. But not only has it lost length, it's lost thickness, it's lost volume. And what we're starting to see as these glaciers shrink is that the peak flow in the rivers in late summer, when it's dry everywhere, is diminishing. So it's not that we're going to lose the rivers, but we're losing an important source or an important segment of the flow at really critical times of the year. So everything comes back to being connected. And if we don't preserve places like this, we're going to lose everything.
With ice climbing, it's a lot of it is a head game. You basically just have to be confident in your ability to get up the ice and your swings and your kicks. the ice can break off, but generally, you know, as long as you've got a good tool placement in one hand and you find another good tool placement with the other hand, then you'll generally make progression up the ice. For some people, it's the cold. Some people don't really care how cold it is. Also, you have to think about the stability of the snow and what you're going to be climbing underneath or what you might have to cross to get to the ice climb.
The real beginning of Banff National Park, of course, was the railway, and it was 3 railway workers that saw this great steam coming up from the ground, kind of shimmied down this tree that was down the hole and discovered the Banff Hot Springs. So now the National Historic Site Cave and Basin.
But what they ended up doing was they built what's considered the first hotel in Banff. Right here in this little space, they built for what they could find, some wood or mud, and they built a shack, and on the door they had hotel. And so that was our first hotel in Banff. If you arrived in those days, for $3.25, you could stay at the Banff Spring Hotel, and for 5 additional cents, you can come out here and enjoy this nice warm water. And it became a very, very popular place.
What we're doing right now is we're testing water chemistry. And what we find in these springs is that there's really low levels of dissolved oxygen. And so that limits, plus the warm temperatures, what type of life forms can survive in these very harsh environments. So it's part of the regular monitoring. We just are concerned about, want to see how populations fluctuate seasonally and also how the water chemistry also changes. What we found is if we don't wipe out our tracks, people see a set of tracks there, oh, somebody else has been there, so if they've been there, so why can't I go there?
The town is not moving, but how can we live with wilderness? We have to compromise, and we get to see these amazing animals out here, and we wanted them to be healthy. We wanted them to be continuing being part of the national park. We want to maintain that wilderness.